you so much. Good afternoon to all of you. I've been a professor, so I know how hard it is to be here post-lunch. So, so I actually wanted to start my talk with a few videos so that I don't have to do the talking. My work will probably do some talking, and hopefully you will not get too bored.
Minus 20 seconds. Minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 0. Plus 5 seconds. Lift off confirmed.
It's a 2-minute video.
Plus 10 seconds. P3 track. Plus 15 seconds. P4 tracking.
R2 tracking.
Plus 20 seconds. P2 tracking. P1 tracking. Plus 25 seconds. Plus 30 seconds.
Maneuver happened. Wind biasing is completed.
You should see the young people in the control room.
Right. Plus 1 minute.
Thank you. Cut to the next scene.
Incubated at IIT Madras, the ePlane Co. is building India's first and the world's most compact flying electric taxi with a vision to make flying ubiquitous. Founded by Professor Satya Chakravarthy, we're the first private Indian company to receive DGCA-DOA. Our team has designed, developed, manufactured, assembled, and tested. ATVA, India's most sustainable fixed-wing hybrid eVTOL drone. Optimal for imaging and logistics applications. Now ready to be commercialized. E50, the subscale prototype of the flying taxi, has been tested and successfully flown. It's India's largest drone, 3 by 3 meter sized. Now building the passenger flying taxi first prototype. Further prototyping and flight trials for certification, we've built autonomous flight paths for collision avoidance. We'll set up autonomous ATCs for safe landing. On vertiports, on vertihubs, and on vertic stops, you can fly on demand by booking the ePlane on your phone at accessible pricing. Fly in the world's most compact air taxi soon. Built in India for the world.
Thanks again. The next one, I actually do a bit of talking, but this is actually a YouTube upload by Business Line just yesterday, and I think the news article in print is actually up here today. Not going to play the whole video for you. It has to be done from there. Just about the first 1 minute or so, I'll ask them to stop. Can you please start this? So Hyperloop is actually one such thing that's happening, which is at Tayur we are now ready with about a 410 meter long tube, which we are planning to extend to about 450 meters. And when that happens, we will actually be, I think, the world's longest such tube. And definitely, even now at 410, we are probably the only such tube in academic institution that is now going to be available for a global competition from now on. Because current global competitions do not have a vacuum tube facility that's available. So in that sense, we expect that we can actually shift the gravity of Hyperloop technology development focus to India, right? And that's where questions like, is it okay for India and all that stuff? Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Good. Let's just move on to the next thing. This is again something that I just took pictures of right yesterday. We have this startup called X2 Fuels and Energy, where we convert unsegregated municipal solid waste into crude oil. And the pilot plant, as you can see, is actually getting ready. In fact, just yesterday we got it powered up, and I had the opportunity to hit the first power button, and we started loading waste into the shredder just yesterday. We're expecting to actually get it commissioned by August 15th, and probably spend a couple of months undergoing teething troubles, and then get it fully operational pretty soon thereafter. The fifth in the line, I think it's about fifth, yeah. Yeah, okay. Is Galaxy, so which is doing world's first hybrid imaging satellite. What is hybrid about it? It's actually a bit of mumbo jumbo for just one line, synthetic aperture radar and multispectral camera. What does it do? It's essentially an all-weather night and day Earth observation satellite at a fairly high resolution. You wouldn't believe that most Earth observation satellites actually work for only about a quarter of the time. Just like your cars, they're getting parked most of the time in a parking lot. Here we are, basically running out of excuses for a satellite not to work 24/7. That's essentially what we're doing with this combination of sensors. The last one, I think, is Aerostruvilos. It's a tongue twister. It's a Greek for gas turbines, which are the kind of engines that power aircraft. And here we actually have a micro gas turbine that is extremely fuel agnostic, to the point that we should be able to take the crude oil from the waste and then directly put into this. And that actually sets up kind of like a circular economy. We make the fuel, we consume the fuel locally. We don't having to import any fuel anymore and so on. So we can actually take this micro gas turbine power generator and put it on board a truck, which could actually be a hybrid electric truck. So in the front end would be a electric vehicle, but in the back end you have a choice of multiple fuel tanks in which you can fill fuel. It could also be used in air-conditioned long-distance buses, for example. So my quarterly calendar looks like this from last quarter. So we had the Agnikul suborbital launch. In this quarter, we are expecting the Hyperloop tube track to be inaugurated. And we will actually be launching our ePlane subscale cargo prototype flight. And next quarter, we expect the X2 Fuels 5 ton per day pilot plant to be operational. By January, we expect the ePlane full-scale passenger first prototype flight, and also the global Hyperloop competition. And in about a year from now, we should actually have the Agnikul full orbital flight going to space. And thereafter, we expect the Galaxy first satellite launch either on board a PSLV or a SpaceX rocket. That's not been decided yet. And of course, I think about a year and a half from now, we should actually have the electric bus from the Aerostruvilos multi-fuel hybrid EV. So let's do some talking now. So what's common to all of these, right? The first thing that we have to look at is globally competitive tech. So how many times in whatever we said, we always use these words, globally, or the world's first, or only, or the most, or the first, and the best, and so on. So when I actually went to the US for my grad school, I found that Americans would just loosely use the word globally, right? Worlds. They had a World Series where only 2 teams around the world would actually play basketball. Okay, then cricket is much better, right? So if you're actually a developed country, you start thinking that you're the world's first, regardless of whether it's factual or not. Okay, so but here these are factual. So because we are a developing country, we have this brown curse that we have to prove to ourselves before anybody else that we are actually the world's best, right? That's what we do. And that we need to do this. And it's not as if like we can avoid this. I'll tell you why. The tech is actually crafted to foster an unbeatable business case. Unless you actually have a business case, don't develop a tech at all. And that's a professor from IIT Madras telling you. Okay? So we adopt a tech for biz approach. Unless it actually fosters a business case, don't do this tech. And it has to be globally competitive. The second, it's a no-brainer that these technologies actually feed into each other, and we are actually creating a full ecosystem. The first no-brainer is, of course, Agnikul rockets can launch galaxy-sized satellites. That's essentially the end game. ePlane eVTOLs can connect first mile and last mile to and from Hyperloop stations. You can actually go Chennai to Bangalore in about 15 to 35 minutes, depending upon which part of the next decade you are going to be in. But how do you get to the Hyperloop station? It's in the middle of the city in Chennai and middle of the city in Bangalore, unlike a 40-kilometer ride that you have to take here, from the airport or to the airport here, and then show up 1 hour or 2 hours ahead of the flight for security check and all of that. No such hassles. You actually ask for a aircraft to come to your rooftop, take you to the Hyperloop station, and then get to the other city in about 15 to 20 minutes, and then take another aircraft back to your actual destination. And of course, aerostructures can actually use extra fuels. So that's a circular economy that I talked about. Right? We produce our fuels locally, and we consume them locally. That's how we expect the economy to get pump prime significantly. The third, I coined this term called defrastructure in 2019, and I have a TED talk on this. Unabashed self-promotion, sorry about that. This is to essentially challenge the notion that you need to have infrastructure for you to be actually a developed country. Right? The developed countries did what they did according to a certain script in the last century. But in this century, we can actually do this in a different way. So look at what we do. Mini launch vehicles, small planes, microsatellites, micro gas turbines, all of these are small. We can actually do large-scale things by a large number of small things. You don't need to necessarily have everything to be made very large. That makes it extremely modular, easier to develop. I'm a professor. I'm actually doing all these things out of IIT Madras. Right? How is it possible for us to do this if I have to imagine doing a SpaceX kind of rocket all at once, or a Boeing kind of plane all at once? Doesn't make sense. Right? So this is extremely modular, and you can actually have an on-demand deployment, whether it is launching a satellite, whether it is making a satellite, whether it is getting on a plane and taking a ride, or whatever you want to do, you should be able to do on demand instead of actually waiting in a line. That's what we are trying to do here. And it's actually extremely low on infrastructure. We use extremely small launch pads. I think our launch pad is probably as big as this stage here, by the way. Right? So if you go to Sriharikota, we have something called Agnikul launch pad. AALP is what they call it. It's about this big, as big as this. And we don't need airports. In fact, we don't even need the kind of vertiports that the Americans and Europeans are talking about for their electric planes, as a matter of fact. Right? You don't need very expensive refineries. Look at the kind of infrastructure that you need to actually get petrol in your petrol bunk. Right? The amount of infrastructure that's being used is humongous. You just cut through all of that stuff. Frugal engineering, I think this is a no-brainer for people who have done things in India. So the tech development, actually, at 1/10 of the typical investment it takes for doing something very similar elsewhere in the world. This is actually, I have lots of data to prove this. And what does it mean finally for the end customer? It's one thing to actually develop this at 1/10 the cost, but am I actually doing something very expensive for the end customer? No. The cost structures are actually extremely affordable in the Indian context. So I should actually be profitable in India. And that's simply not because of the India labor arbitrage. It's actually because of the tech innovation that we do that enables the frugality and the cost to the customer. So we actually craft this tech for the best business that we can offer. Coming out of India, all these things. In fact, the reason why I'm actually standing here and talking to you is because the organizers said, hey, everybody needs to know that you're doing these things. And people don't believe this. They ask the question, oh, can we do these things in India? Look, boss, you look in the mirror. We are actually a different world today when compared to what it used to be, right? So there is a wow factor about actually making this in India. The Americans, for example, will not even think about these things until it's actually in their face, because that's their world, right? But we can actually grow by ourselves. We have to start believing that we can do this, right? Make in India for the world. And increasingly, what's good for India is actually good for the world. If I can do globally competitive, world-class tech out of India at an extremely affordable cost for Indian customers, I'm pretty sure an American would like to buy that too, right? That's essentially what we are doing here. Commercialization round the corner. This is not a distant dream. Velocity of dreams was actually what we're talking about. No, I don't sleep too much, so I don't have too many of these dreams. I actually do and get to work and do things, right? So let's just look at the timescales. Agnikul, next to next year, we should actually be commercializing. ePlane, the cargo is actually happening now. In about 2 to 3 years, passengers should actually get certified, right? The certified plane should actually be up and flying by 2025, 26, 27, thereabouts. Twitter Hyperloop, cargo in about 2 to 3 years, passenger in about 5 to 6 years. Before the end of this decade, we are actually having funding plans that are being worked out for this right now. Extra fuels later this year and commercialization in the next year. Galaxy next year for the first launch. After that, we'll actually be launching more, so in the next 1 or 2 years. Aerostruvelos in about 1 or 2 years, next year onwards, that is. So all of this is actually happening right now as we speak. So what is the last common thing about these things? I'm the co-founder in all of these. And I'm a lone founder at ePlane, working full-time, of course. Advisor in a few more startups, Nutrace, Aerodome, Neurostellar, and so on. All of these started out of my lab, which is actually the National Center for Combustion R&D, which is, again, the world's largest combustion center of its kind in the world. So again, one of those world's whatever superlatives. And this is actually part of the IIT Madras deep tech startup ecosystem that is actually thriving now with about 400 plus startups, many of them very popular today. And what are we doing this for, and why are we doing this? We are actually building India startup by startup this decade. Thank you.